Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Antioch City Council special study session for the budget this evening. Thank you for coming out. We will start with roll call. Turn it over to City Clerk for roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Councilmember Thorpe.
Here.
Councilmember Ogerjoke.
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Motz.
I am here.
Mayor Wright.
Here.
All present.
If you'd please, I'm going to ask Mayor Pro Tem Motz to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join. Well, welcome out to the study session today. I'll turn it over to our city manager, Ron Bernal.
Thank you, Mayor Wright and members of the City Council. I apologize. First of all, I have a little bit of a cold, so if I sound funny, it's because I am. Tonight, this afternoon, Antioch's decision makers find themselves in a position the city hasn't been in over a decade, and that's deliberating on a general fund budget that has more revenue than expenses, or basically a budget with surplus funds. This is a happy occasion on account of the passage of Measure C, a half-cent sales tax passed by voters in 2013, and more recently in November, the passage of Measure W, a 1-cent sales tax. Measure C's generated over $30 million for the city of Antioch in the past 5 years, with the specific goal of hiring more police and code enforcement as Antioch has rebuilt and come out of the recession. Measure W is projected to generate over $300 million over the next 20 years and will allow for the hiring of not only more police and code enforcement officers, but also fund other quality of life issues in Antioch. The City Council's already held 2 council budget study sessions in March where the heads of each department provided staffing requests to better provide level of service to our citizens. Council provided input, which has been incorporated into tonight's budget presentation. Antioch works off a 2-year budget, meaning that the City Council will be asked to approve budgets for fiscal year 19 and 20 and fiscal years 19 and 21 in June of this year, and that will start in July 1st. Finance Director Merchant has prepared 3 different versions of the budget for you. One is a baseline budget, which takes our current end-of-year projected 19 budget and takes that forward for the next 2 years. The second is called an enhanced budget, which takes in all of the asks of the staff in addition to input that the City Council provided during the previous study sessions. And the third budget is called a balanced budget, and that's one that I've put together, which takes into account that we want to end up with a balanced budget at the end of 2 years and also end up with 20% reserves at the end of 7 years. So that's what that budget looks like. Since Measure W is the source of approximately $15 million a year in additional funding, I want to read the wording of the ballot that the voters approved by over 66% in November. This is what it says. Antioch's quality of life measure to maintain Antioch's fiscal stability, police patrols, 911 emergency response, youth violence prevention programs, ensuring water quality and safety, repairing streets, cleaning up parks and illegal dumping, restoring youth after school and summer programs, other essential services, shall the measure be adopted, approving an ordinance to renew the sales tax at 1-cent rate, raising approximately $14 million annually, expiring in 20 years, with mandatory annual independent financial audits and independent citizens oversight. That's the question that was on the ballot that was passed by the voters in November. This is important since much of tonight's discussion will revolve around how this additional money will be spent. Also important to remember is the city's unfunded pension liability and the uncertainty of cost increases in the future. Council is to be commended for the decision to fully fund payment of both the city's pension and OPEB, which stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits, over the next 30 years. This represents a significant step towards addressing this important matter. Before Finance Director Merchant begins with her presentation, I want to briefly remind the City Council of several significant items they've accomplished over the past 2 years. So if there's a PowerPoint that was handed out to you all. This one might be a little bit hard to read, but basically ordinances. I'm not going to read all of them, but these are all the ordinances that council's passed in the last 2 years. Cannabis zoning. You guys have a DA on the agenda for tonight. Massage hourly rate and an alarm ordinance. Police services CFD. You guys. Sidewalk vendor program, you approved the downtown specific plan focus area, our zoning ordinance, the tobacco retailers and smoke shop prohibition, and accessory dwelling units. So those are just some of the things that you all addressed during the last year. On staffing, you hired a new city attorney, an economic development director, public works director. You added 2 additional police officers to the budget and then authorized overhiring 6 additional to take us up to 110 officers, an engineering project manager, registered vet tech, couple of proactive code enforcement officers, business license techs so we could collect revenues more quickly. On projects, which are numerous, we have the Brackish Water Project, which you all know is very significant, a $65 million project to take our salty water in the Delta and make sure that we maintain reliable, safe, and clean drinking water. We had the Hillcrest BART station to open, Highway 4 is getting landscaped, Northeast Annexation, Sewer and Water, $4 million in improvements, solar at Lone Tree Golf Course, West Antioch Creek, $6 million improvement to decrease the flooding there, Prosserville and Contra Loma playgrounds. We're going to be working on the council upgrades pretty quick. We have cameras out on Highway 4 at Hillcrest. We've improved Waldy Plaza, LED street lights. We have the Marina Boat Launch restroom is going to be starting up and working on an HCP. Some plans and studies and agreements you guys have adopted over the last 2 years. We had our vision and strategic plan for 2019 through 2029, which was significant. Went over a sewer and water rate study. We did a cost allocation and user fee study, which is the first time we've done that in over 10 years. We established a police services CFD fee, which brings in over $450 per residential dwelling unit coming in for now and going forward. The downtown specific plan. You guys established the Lone Tree Golf Course agreement, which hadn't been done in many years, and made a final agreement with that. And as I said, the HCP. Some initiatives and measures were significant. Measure W, which I mentioned earlier, the 1 cent sales tax. You passed district elections, which will begin in 2020, making Antioch into a district elected city. And you also had the Richland and Save Mount Diablo initiatives, which were significant in the Sand Creek focus area. Regarding new developments in business, the list is long. We have the Antioch Auto Center, Infinity Auto Dealership that's coming to us. Smith's Landing's open. 119 room redo of Comfort Inns and Suites. Aviano, Hydorn Village, Wildflower Station, that's an exciting project, 90,000 square feet of commercial, 98 condos, 22 single family. Black Diamond Ranch is a smaller project. We have, go on to the next one, Tabora Gardens, which is affordable housing for seniors and homeless, which is a big project. The Rocket Ship Charter School invested $14 million on Cavallo Avenue. We had Habit Burger, which isn't a big deal, but it tore down the old Caros and put up a new facility there. We had Tesla charging stations just open up at the Target parking lot, the supercharging stations, and Almond Knolls Apartments, 58 units on Worrell. Then on the right there, we Costco Fuels coming in, adding more pumps. Acorn Business Park, Granite Expo is going to be opening a showroom here in Antioch. Roddy Ranch Focus Area, East Bay Regional Park District, Family Justice Center. So the list is long of things that we've been working on, or the council's been working on. We also, under regional efforts, we have the Contra Costa Northern Waterfront Economic Development Initiative. We have EC Squared, that is a collaborative of the Chamber and East Contra Costa County for bringing jobs. East Contra Costa Jobs Corridor Working Group, the homeless care facility efforts that we're working on with the county, and the $3 million in emergency funding from the state, and in the Delta 6 meeting we have with the mayors and the city managers. Some events and community efforts you guys have been a part of. The Food Truck Thursdays, which has been really successful. The MLK Day of Service, which we pulled off and did our own this year, was a really nice event, and we're hoping to do more of that in the future. We revamped our summer concert series, and then we celebrated 50 years as a sister city with Chichibu, Japan. Litigation, significant. We have a couple of lawsuits with the Department of Water Resources going. One's over the water fix project that wants to take water from northern to southern California that we believe impacts our water system here in Antioch. So we're fighting to make sure that we're made whole on that. Our 1968 agreement, which pays us when we can't use water from the river, and then West Antioch Creek litigation with Ames. Regarding communication, we've really been working hard in this area this year. We have the branding and marketing Opportunity Lives Here campaign, which has just been kicked off recently around the Bay Area. Updated our website. We have See-Click Fix, where people can report and have interaction with staff on problems in the community. We have a quality of life subcommittee and community surveys, and Join the Conversation, which was significant, providing input from the community, and also was a big part of the Measure W campaign. And then we have the city report, Measure C update, and Antioch on the Move. Some enhanced services that we've included this year. Community development is now open 5 days a week, so the counter's open all day. Library hours were increased by 1 day. The Business Watch program was kicked off, which has been significant in helping businesses be safer. We had proactive police details, which the chief was able to increase, which has had some significant results. And then council just recently approved cul-de-sac and median landscape maintenance, increasing that around the community. So that's just a list. That was over 100 items I just went through really quickly. But I just wanted, before we get into this year's budget, just want to remind the council that that's since June of 17. There's been a lot of significant work done by you all. And so just want to thank you for that. I'm going to turn this over to our Finance Director, Dawn Merchant, now, and she'll be able to lead you through the general plan update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council Member. We have a lot of information to go through tonight. As you've seen the staff report, it's a very thick packet with a lot of information to absorb and go through. But we have a PowerPoint that will intend to kind of summarize everything, help you visualize it a little better before we get more into the meat and potatoes, substance of it, and get some direction from council. As Ron stated, we did prepare 3 versions of the budget, the baseline. The one item that Ron didn't mention on the baseline, it's a little slightly enhanced from the fiscal year 19 budget, because council did authorize the 110 overstaffing because of the passage of Measure W. However, for the current fiscal year, if any were to go over the 104, it was going to come out of salary savings. So this baseline budget in the upcoming year includes funding for those 6 additional officers. So right off the bat, about $1.1 million of Measure W funding has been allocated to adding 6 more police officers for 110 sworn funding in this baseline budget that's being presented this evening. So on this first slide for the fund balance projections on the baseline, we see our revised fiscal year 18-19. This only includes a little bit of Measure W 1% sales tax funding. It was passed as Measure W. You'll see on the charts that are in the staff report on the tables, we've just called it a 1% add-on tax, just to make it a little bit easier instead of having a bunch of different measure numbers floating around. However, if council does want to just maintain it as Measure W, we will certainly update that in the budget documents. We are projecting to get some Measure W money, as it did start. It's effective April 1st, so April 1st through June 30th. Measure C ends, and we're projecting to get some Measure W money that will tag in. However, we actually will not get the cash money from that till about the September timeframe. The state they calculate all the collections, it comes 2 to 3 months later, so it'll be shown as a receivable in our system, booked as revenue, but it's not hard cash to spend, just so everybody can understand that. So in the fiscal year 19-20, that's where we have a full year of projected 1% sales tax. We're projecting just almost $15 million for that for the entire year. As you can see, there's only excess spending or excess revenues of just over $3 million. You would expect that probably to be more in the neighborhood of $7 million for the new $7 million allocation above Measure C. Part of that $1.1 million is already allocated to police. So if you didn't have that in there, that number would be, $4.1 million. And then it's absorbing just other regular increases in the budget for, increase in contracts, staffing costs, etc. And then in the fiscal year 2021 budget, we're increasing our surplus a bit to $3.8 million, and this is as the Measure W funds are growing. Fund balance are really good in all 3-year projections, just about $21.5 million in fiscal year 1920, and in 2021, $25.3 million. So we're definitely meeting our reserve policy with this. This maintains all existing staffing levels with the exception of the 6 additional officers off the 18-19 budget. A little bit what's going into these revenue numbers. For 1920, we're projecting a 6% increase in property tax, a 2.7% increase in sales tax. This is the non-Measure W, 14.9 million in the Measure W 1% sales tax revenue, 2.2 million in Measure O revenue, which is the business license tax on the residential rental units. And in fiscal year 2021, we're projecting a 7% increase in property tax, bumping that up for a little bit for some housing projects that should be coming online. 3.91% increase in sales tax. Part of this increase is due to hopefully the completion of the Antioch Auto Center, generating a little bit more sales tax for the city, bumping up the Measure W 1% sales tax to 15.4 million, and again 2.2 million in the Measure O revenue. So here's a look at our historical revenues, just to show where the city came from pre-recession to now, how much we've recovered, and how this has really helped our budget been able to expand. We were just about 42 million in fiscal year 9. You can see right after that the recession hit, immediately dropped down to about 35 million. With the passage of Measure O and Measure C, one in 2013 and 2014, you can see how significantly our revenues bumped up to just over 55 million. And then with the Measure W, that's coming up a little bit higher, and you can see by the end of 2021 projecting just about $73 million. That police services paid up front, just to explain that. As you know, the city did establish 2 police services CFDs. One of the development projects is just paying that up front to not be part of that CFD, so it's just a little over $1.2 million. So in fiscal year 21, we're projecting that to come in, and that's going into the police department revenue to pay for police services. So that's just a one-time upfront payment of those CFDs. So that's an explanation of what that means in that slide. Now for the baseline, some expenditures assumptions, and all of these salary assumptions for raises are what are in the bargaining unit memorandum of understandings that were approved by City Council. So 2.5 salary increase for APOA and APSMA. Now they get a range between 2.5 and 4.5 based on a 4-city formula to be second in that formula for that. So we budgeted 2.5. However, there is the risk that the salary could be higher. Just so you know, but we feel just based on the levels of neighboring cities, the 2.5 should be sufficient for that. 2% salary increase for the management, confidential, OE3 bargaining groups, and 2.75 for APWEA. And the big part of our salaries is our PERS employer contributions, 37.433% for the miscellaneous employees, 64.935% for safety classic employees, 22.478% for safety second tier employees, and 13.834% safety PEPRA rate. For fiscal year 1920, this equates to approximately 736,000 more in pension contributions versus this current fiscal year. Also in 1920 on the baseline, funding 110 sworn out of the Measure W funds. The golf course agreement, as you know, is part of the agreement that was approved last year. The city took over payment of the debt service we had for the golf course clubhouse, and then we're also paying for the city water that's here. They're paying for the Delta Diablo recycled water as part of that agreement. And then recreation water park subsidies of almost $2 million. Animal services subsidy of 1.3 million. These are shown as transfers out in the budget when you see the budget summaries. And then 1.3 of additional OPEB funding that council committed to be coming from the budget stabilization reserve. For fiscal year 2021, an overall 5.4% increase in personnel costs based on the pre-negotiated memorandum of understandings for the rates they're going to get. For PERS, 39.433% for miscellaneous, 71.935% for safety classic, 23.85% for safety second tier, and 13.986 for safety PEPRA, resulting in an increase of $1.6 million over the fiscal year 1920 budget, and again the 1.3 million OPEB funding. The recreation and water park subsidies projecting to increase to just over 2.1 million animal services subsidy increasing just a bit to 1.38 million, and again continuing the golf course water subsidy and the debt service payment. Now, when we come to enhance, this includes all the salary personnel ask that was brought to council at a prior staff meeting. So that is on page 5 of the staff report. And a couple of things that have changed since we brought that to council. Some of the council members expressed desire to more code enforcement and why didn't you request this additional position and so forth. So those have all been added into this staffing table that's on page 5. You can see it's a lot of positions. We give the 19-20 cost, and those are prorated based half a year based on when the positions would potentially be hired, and the fiscal year 2021 cost if we hired all the positions. So that's what this enhanced budget includes. And with that, there are additional costs when you have additional staff, workstations, vehicles, computer equipment, etc. And those additional costs are included in the enhanced budget as well. And those additional costs are outlined on chart D on page 10, but we'll also get to a slide with it too. So for the enhanced budget, the fiscal year revised 18-19, of course, that remains the same as the first slide we saw. However, in the proposed 19-20, we're going from a surplus of just over $3 million to now only a surplus of $24,782. So that's quite a difference. It takes almost $3 million of that surplus. And then in 2021, we're then going into deficit spending. While we do still have a healthy reserve in this year, we're deficit spending to the tune of $1,763,423. So here's the table I was referring to in the staff report. Things that have been included in the enhanced version was additional recreational youth services funding. We've added $350,000 to the proposed 19-20 and then $700,000 to the 2021. The reason the amount is only 50% in 19-20 is, once the budget adoption is adopted, day one, we don't know what programs and services necessarily are going to be offered. We don't necessarily have the people hired for that. So we figure there's going to be some planning time, particularly with the council authorized the network coordinator position that was authorized, figuring out additional services that might want to be added. Additional economic development funding. Now this is additional of $775,000 each year. There's already an amount in the baseline, so it's not that it would only be $775. I just want to make that clear, but we'll get to a slide later that shows the different for economic development, what the budget was under each version. And then all staffing requests. Just over $1.7 million in 19-20 and 2021, all those costs amount to $4.26 million. And then the costs associated with additional staff. As you can see in 19-20, it's $411,000 and drops down to $134,000 in 2021 because many of the costs are just one-time outlays, vehicles, purchase of a computer. You don't need to do it that next year. However, in the next year, you still need to provide training, ongoing training for those positions and supplies. Then we get to our balanced budget. This was a budget, when we looked at the projections for all years, we felt captured the most prioritized positions in talking with departments and also maintained our 20% reserve through fiscal year 26, which you'll see in the outline projections that are coming up. So, we maintain still a surplus. It drops to about one half of what it was at the baseline number, $1,569,371. We end with a ending fund balance of just over $20 million. And in fiscal year 2021, the surplus drops to $389,475, and it's $20,483.88. $483.88. So we have let me find the chart. So the balanced budget added staffing is on page 13 of the staff report. And again, we've outlined the 19-20 costs of those positions as well as the 2021. One thing I'd like to specifically point out that we've done with the officers is that we've increased the funding to 112 in the fiscal year 19-20 budget. We phased it in and then increased that to 115 total sworn in the 2021 budget. So the total investment in police in total staffing is $1.5 million in 19-20 and then $2.7 million in 2021. And then with all staffing adding just over $1.7 million in 19-20, which equates to $3.765 in the 2021 budget. And here's our balance difference from the baseline. Again, we've maintained the same level of the additional youth services funding. We've reduced the economic development funding from the $775,000 down to $275,000 each year. And here is the staffing request, $682,969 and $2.6 million in 2021. And then the costs associated with additional staff, those numbers remain the same as in the enhanced version because we still do need to do all the same initial outlays. So these are budget comparison of each version, and I'm doing it by each fiscal year. So you can see baseline 1920 compared to the balance, which I've put in the middle, compared to the enhanced. So the expenditures in the baseline are almost $66 million. In the balanced, with the mid-range staffing levels, it's $673,681, and in the enhanced with all staffing requests and the full economic development funding, $69,218,270. You can see on the baseline there's a surplus of $3,502. In the balanced, $1,569,371, and in the enhanced, $24,782. So in the enhanced, you'll see in the outline projections, the deficit continues to grow. Now for the baseline, for the 2021, we've compared the baseline, balanced, and enhanced. You can see for total expenditures in 2021 on the baseline, $68.9 million, $72.6 million in the balanced, still maintaining a surplus, and then in the enhanced, $74.7 million with a deficit of $1,763,423. So to give you some background for the budgets that we're changing with some additional monies put towards them, we wanted to show you on economic development budget, the budget version comparisons. So on the revised number, 1819, the total expenditure budget is just over $1 million with $580,000 going towards services and supplies, which is marketing and other activities, conferences and dues for that department. In the baseline, maintaining just was existing in 1819, that number is $1,027,000. Services and supplies, just about the same number. In fiscal year 2021, for the baseline, you can see, again, staying in that $1 million range. And at the bottom row, we've put what's been added over baseline, so you can see the variance difference. And then for the balanced in 1920, it's the $275,000, so the services and supplies go up to $845,000. The balance for 2021, the services and supplies go up to, or not go up to, but are $786,000. You can see the $275,000 additional funding put in there. And then under the enhanced, which includes not only in the $775,000 that was discussed previously, but in the full staffing request, economic development requested an admin analyst position. So that's where that $843,731 comes from. It's the staffing and the $775. You can see that the services and supplies bumps up to $1.3 million. And then in 2021, we have the admin analyst, so it's the $775 plus the full year of the admin analyst, an increase in the budget of almost $925,000, services and supplies at $1.2 million. Now for code enforcement, what was requested in the enhanced budget, the only reductions have been made is reducing the development services text by one position. In addition, the enhanced ask was for 3 code enforcement officers and 1 senior code enforcement officer. The balanced version is 4 code enforcement officers, not having 1 at the senior level. So as you can see in the balanced version compared to the baseline, we're adding over baseline $416,172 in that balanced 1920 column. That includes some additional costs for the staffing as well as the staffing. In fiscal year 2021, the amount added over baseline is $635,080, and that's because now the positions are being funded for a full year. And then in the enhanced, the difference between the enhanced and the baseline, like I said, is 1 less development services tech and the lower rated code enforcement officer position, we're adding $480,386 in 1920, and then in 2021, we're adding $781,849. Then for recreation, recreation is represented as a transfer out because recreation is another fund of the city. So the transfer out line is just the base transfer out based on existing services, programs, and staffing. And we've segregated out youth services to show the additional money being placed over into the recreation fund for those programs. So you can see in the balanced 1920, there's been added $414,099. And in 2021, $828,054. That's the same in both the balanced and enhanced, because not only does it include the additional recreation funding, in the department ask, it was to reclassify specialists to supervisors and 1 office assistant. We've maintained that in both the balanced and the enhanced versions. Now for the police budget, you can see I've put at the bottom not only what's added over baseline, but you can see the increase in the police budget over this current year and the sworn funded staffing each year. So in 18-19, our total expenditures are $37.9 million. The baseline 19-20 increases $5.5 million, with $1.1 million of that being for the 6 additional officers to bring it up to the 110. And the rest due to other increases in their budget, salary, and other things. In the baseline 2021, the budget is $45.2 million, again with the 110 officers, and that cost is $1.156 million in the 2021 budget. Then in the balanced budget, this includes 2 additional officers, 112. That budget is just over $44 million. And an increase of $6.1 million approximately over the 18-19 budget. So this includes not only the 112 officers, but it also includes a crime analyst, a doctor of veterinary medicine full-time versus a part-time position, 1 animal care attendant, and 1 records technician. So you can see that budget adds $538,199 over the baseline 1920. And in the balanced 2021, the expenditures are $46.9 million, which is an increase of almost $9 million over the 18-19 budget, so quite a significant investment, and added over the baseline $1.7 million. And still the 112 officers. The increase over the baseline, of course, is just now it's a full year of funding for those positions versus a half year. And then on the enhanced budget for 1920, we have $44.8 million in total expenditures, which represents 6.9 over the 18-19 budget, $1.3 million over the added over the baseline, and then 115 sworn officers, as well as all the other positions that they requested as outlined on page 5 of the staff report. And then in the enhanced 2021, the expenditures are just over $48 million, an increase of $10 million over 18-19, $2.8 million over the baseline, and maintaining those 115 officers. So just to summarize a little bit of what I've said, in 18-19, Council authorized police officer overhiring up to 110 sworn to be paid from salary savings, but 104 was officially what was funded in the 18-19 budget. So the baseline budget includes the funding for 110 sworn officers at a cost of the $1.91 million in fiscal year 1920 and the $1.156 in 2021 to be funded with Measure W funds. The balanced budget adds 2 additional police officers up to 112 sworn at a cost of $189,712 in fiscal year 1920, increasing to 3 more for a total of 115 sworn in 2021. 1 crime analyst, 1 DVM, and 1 animal care attendant, and 1 records tech. The enhanced adds 5 police officers immediately in 1920 for 115 sworn at a cost of $1.6 million in 1920 and $2.3 million in 2021. 1 crime analyst, 6 CSOs, 2 records techs, 1 office assistant, 1 DVM, and 3 animal care attendants. So these are our projections. We've projected out to fiscal year 25-26. These are our projections as best we know as of today. Projections will always change, and I'm sure this council is aware, and when we do a mid-year review, we'll have updated projections even at that time as we learn of new revenues coming in, expenditure reductions we may be able to make, additional salary savings, etc. I know this is really hard to see. It's a lot of data on this spreadsheet. However, we've separated this at least into the baseline, the enhanced, and then the balanced onto separate sheets. What you can see here is that each fiscal year in the baseline budget, we maintain significantly over the 20% reserve policy that council has. And in the last fiscal year, we're still solid with $29.5 million in fund balance. And we only start deficit spending in fiscal year 24-25, and it increases in 25-26. So this does demonstrate we definitely have the money to be spending on additional services and staffing, and this represents the growth in the Measure W money each year, along with some other revenue projections. In the enhanced budget, this is the all-in going forward with all staff being requested. You can see in fiscal year 2021, as was shown in the prior slides, deficit spending starts 1.763. 21-22, that number goes to 1.29 million, and it's even at the 20%. The reason that's even at 20% is because in fiscal year 22, we begin pulling from the budget stabilization fund to balance this to make it the 20%. And then in 22-23 and each year thereafter, we are pulling from the budget stabilization fund. However, in fiscal year 24-25, the budget stabilization funds have been depleted between balancing this budget and OPEB funding each year. So we fall below the 20% at 11.5%. In 25-26, although we still have fund balance, it's only about $1.6 million with a 1.17% reserve, meaning in the next fiscal year, we will run out of money based on these enhanced full staffing projections. With the balanced budget, we do not begin deficit spending until fiscal year 21-22. As you can see, we still are above 20%, 25.37%. In 22-23, we're at 22.55%. Still deficit spending, but we meet our fund balance reserve target. And then we start drawing from the budget stabilization reserve in fiscal year 24. That's why you see the even 20% number. And we first have a deficit in that year. In 24-25, it pops up to a little bit of a surplus because of transferring in from the budget stabilization fund. And we maintain the 20% through our projections of 25-26. However, this does not leave a whole lot of money left in the budget stabilization reserve. At that point, it's projected to be just under $500,000 left. So anything beyond 25-26, there will not be sufficient funds to maintain the 20%. And this is just a line graph of the different versions, what is projected at this time for fund balance. As you can, the blue line is the baseline, where we maintain significant reserves, just hovering around the $30 million mark in outlying projections. The balance, the green in the middle, you can see it's fairly flat, balanced all the way out to 25-26. The red enhanced, you can see how it significantly dips and going towards the zero mark in 25-26. That concludes the slides, but there definitely is a lot of information to go through. As you can see in the staff report, I did break down the expenditures by category. So on page 8 of the staff report, under the baseline, I show the split between personnel, which is our most significant cost within the general fund, services and supplies, transfers out, and internal services. Internal services is our cost allocation plan. If the council recalls that, that's the cost being shifted to other funds to reimburse for general funded services. So you can see on this chart B in fiscal year 2020, the expenditure breakdown of the 65.9, just about $47 million of that is personnel. Services and supplies is 17.5 million. Transfers out is $4 million. And then our internal services shifted to other funds, the $2.6 million. In each of these versions, you'll see the internal services is the same amount each year just because until staffing and other decisions are made by council, we can't adjust those numbers till we know what we need to adjust out to allocate to other departments for services. On chart A on page 7, you can see an entire general fund budget summary baseline, which gives a little bit more by department and by type of revenue source. That's too much to squeeze into the PowerPoint slide, so you can see where total revenues for June 30th, 2019, 62.3 million, going up to just about 69 million in 2020 and 72.7 million. I've bolded where you can see the 1% sales tax. With Measure C ending March 30th, we're projecting to receive $5,643,557 of Measure C monies through March 31st, and then the 1% sales tax Measure W kicking in April 1st, $3.5 million, increasing to $14.9 million in 2020 and $15.4 million in 2021. And under the expenditures, we've broken it out by department. With under Measure C, the way we had to allocate that and account for that, particularly with our oversight committee, you can see we have the police services Measure C, 5.816 million. So that is the estimate through March 31st. And then you can, Measure C was also allocated to code enforcement, and then the estimate through March 31st is $625,084 being spent through code enforcement. So as part of this budget exercise, we'll need to determine exactly how we're allocating the Measure W funds, so it's clear for the oversight committee as we present them with here's how the funds came in and here's how they were spent per council direction. On page 9, there's chart C, which is the same budget version for the enhanced. The only thing that is changing on revenue numbers for both the enhanced and the balanced budget is that with additional staffing, we're projecting to receive about $285,000 more in assessment fee revenue and plan checking fees. So that is incorporated. That's the only difference in the revenues between the baseline and then the balanced and the enhanced. Both have that additional $285,000 in there. And then on chart G on page 12, the same outline for the balanced budget, just so you can see the totals that are in there. And also as part of this exercise, we're also looking at the recreation fund and the Pruitt Water Park and the Animal Services Fund, as these funds receive transfers out to those funds. It shows us transfers in those funds. It's money to help the operations because they do not generate enough revenue to cover all their costs. So the recreation fund budget is listed on page 17. This of course does not include, this is essentially a baseline. It doesn't include the additional staffing. On the recreation fund, we are going to be combining the Pruitt Water Park into the recreation fund altogether, as we've had a recommendation from our auditors because there's such a significant investment from the general fund to the water park fund. It doesn't truly function as an enterprise. If it was an enterprise, it would have full cost recovery. So for accounting purposes, it should not be classified as an enterprise fund. So we're putting it as another division within the recreation fund. So you can see on this chart, it says transfer in from Pruitt Fund. That's just a close out of that fund to then an accounting entry essentially to make it part of the recreation fund. Now the fiscal year 19-20 transfer is increasing approximately $735,000 just in this baseline version, with $508,000 of this attributable to minimum wage increases for part-time help, and the remaining for some additional programming and other regular contractual increases. If the additional staffing requested is approved, then the fiscal year 19-20 transfer will increase an additional $64,399, and 2021 will increase by $128,354. And then if the additional funding for youth programs is approved, the $350,000 and the $700,000, that will, the transfer out from the general fund will increase by those amounts each year respectively. Then on page 18 we have the Animal Control Fund that falls under the police department. And again, this is a baseline version of this budget. It doesn't include having a full-time DVM, the additional animal care attendant, etc. And transfer from the general fund is projected to increase by $313,084 over the current fiscal year due to higher personnel costs. And that was because there was some salary savings in this current fiscal year, as well as some salary offset costs from the ARF. We did get some grant monies from them. So it made our costs appear lower, but now having to recognize the full years of those costs, that's why it's going up to $313,000. So if the requested staffing is approved, the fiscal year 1920 transfer will increase $180,626 in the enhanced version, and in fiscal year 2021 will increase $413,678. And under the balanced version, the transfer would increase $108,897 in fiscal year 1920, and then $252,786 in 2021. And additionally, when we're ready to get to it, attachment B is a summary of each division's budget, revenues, and expenditures baseline version. And the reason we included the baseline is that's the budget we started with before considering all the enhanced, plus the majority of the balanced and enhanced versions really only changes the salaries. The majority of the services and supplies and transfers all remain the same numbers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to council for questions, any follow-up, anything else you want to see, and we can take it, let you steer it from here.
Thank you, Don. We do have quite a few members of the audience here today. Do we have speaker cards? We're going to go ahead and listen to the audience. James Stenger, followed by Steve Aiello.
Mayor, council members, I'm James Stanger. I'm a sergeant with the Antioch Police Department. I wanted to address violent crime and gangs. I've been a part of the gang unit since 2008. I was a violent crimes detective for 6 years, and I currently am the sergeant of the violent crimes unit. And I just want to say that since Measure C passed, we've taken a huge stride in reducing violent crimes and gangs in the city, and that I want to continue to see that hard work by the city and the members of the Antioch Police Department. I think we're right on the cusp of being where we should be with manpower, and I believe that with the proper funding that we can continue doing the good work that we do and do a little bit more by having a few more officers and analysts and techs and CSOs. So I just don't want to go backwards, and I don't want to stay stagnant. Right now we're, over the last few years, we've been one of the most dangerous cities in California for our size, and we're going to fall off that list this year, and I want to be way off that list in 5 years. So thank you for the time.
Steve Aiello, followed by Samantha Peterson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Steve Aiello, and I'm the Antioch POA President. Today you have the opportunity to make a decision that can change the perception of Antioch, allowing the police department to increase its staffing levels to provide the level of service the citizens of Antioch voted for and deserve. As you recall, Measure C was voted and passed by the citizens to allow an increase in staffing for the police department and code enforcement. Under Measure C, the police department is now over 100 sworn police officers. Measure W was always advertised to replace Measure C, and in fact double the revenue of Measure C. The numbers have consistently showed that $7 million in revenue under Measure C, and was always projected that Measure W would raise $14 million. The APOA endorsed Measure W because we were told 80% of the monies would be allocated to the police department to increase staffing to bring the PD to 115 sworn. 1 officer per 1,000 residents, yet still below the county average of 1.2 officers per 1,000. I'll remind you that members of council have publicly stated that we're supportive of allocating 80% of total revenue of Measure W, which is just over $11 million, and also hiring additional police officers, bringing the total sworn to 115. I've heard debates with regards to the unfunded liabilities to PERS. I understand this is a significant cost to the city, which is why in 2016, 2 years before PEPR requirements took effect with legacy and classic employees, the POA negotiated its current contract to include an increase to each of its safety members contributing to PERS. In 2016 through 2018, the only requirement of safety employees was a 9% contribution. Because of the term of the POA contract, the 9% would not have been negotiated until 2021. Because the POA understands the city's lack of revenue and cost of PERS, the police officers began to pay 10% of their portion of PERS in 2016, 11% in 2017, and 12% in 2018. The additional 3% the police officers have been paying for PERS has been going to the city with the understanding the monies are being allocated to pay the unfunded liability. There is no contract with the city of Antioch and PERS to directly allocate those monies to the offset the employer's normal cost. So I ask, where has this money been gone since 2016? The general fund or payments to unfunded liability? We just don't know. Now it's time to increase the police department staffing because that is what the voters overwhelmingly wanted and voted for when they said yes to Measure W. I know there's a big push for youth services amongst members of the council. I'm not against youth services, but this is not the time to compromise the fight against real crime and continue to jeopardize the safety of Antioch residents. Thank you.
Samantha Peterson, followed by Mike Barbanica.
Good evening, Mayor Wright and council members. My name is Samantha Peterson and I am a community services officer with the Antioch Police Department. I have had the honor of serving this wonderful community for 6 years now. My assignments at the police department have been a jailer, explorer advisor, crime scene investigator, and department training coordinator. One of the responsibilities of CSOs is to relieve officers from lower priority job duties. During the recession, the department let go of approximately 15 community service officers. The department and city felt the impact because this forced police officers to respond to lower priority calls for service that CSOs previously handled. Sworn personnel also had to take on all the other duties of the CSOs. Some of these duties included staffing the department's jail, registering sex offenders and drug offenders, and transporting arrestees to the Martinez detention facility. With increased staffing of CSOs, it will relieve officers to address and patrol high crime areas and ensure our community is a safe place to live, work, and play. It is my recommendation for the greater benefit of the police department and our community to increase the number of staffing. Thank you.
Mike Barbanica, followed by Tom Furman.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Barbanica. I'm a resident of the city of Antioch. I've lived in the city since 1970, seen a lot of changes, and I can appreciate what's gone on. I grew up around this police department because my mom worked here my entire time growing up. When Measure W was being considered, I was approached and asked as a business owner if I would support it. And initially I said, no, I won't. And then people came back to me and said, this is going to be for the police department to up the numbers for the police department. And I said, if you can assure me that that is the case, that this is what the focus of this is going to be, I will get behind it. I have no problem with that. So I started making calls, spoke to people within the community, put it up on my billboard, put it on the website. I wanted to get the word out there that we needed this because we need more cops in this town, for all of us. The residents of the city in this local community are watching because they feel that they've been bait and switched. They do. It's that simple. They feel that they were sold one thing and they're being possibly delivered another. So I'm urging the council to consider not what I'm saying, but what the police chief who's running this department is recommending, the officers that are working day and night, and the community that backed this measure. This is what we all wanted. We wanted more cops. Youth, 100%. We need programs for youth, no doubt. But we need a safe place for people in this community. I'm tired of wondering when my kids go down to the store at night, are they going to be okay? I'm tired of getting calls at my office that says, I want to buy a house locally, anywhere but Antioch. I'm tired of getting calls when people want to move, and I say, where are you going to move to? And they say, anywhere but Antioch. We can turn that around very, very simply. They're doing the work. Let's give them the support that they need, and let's give them the staffing they need. Thank you.
Tom Furman, followed by Sal Sabrante.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Tom Furman. I'm a 46-year resident of the city. I spent 29 years of my life as a police officer for the police department. Retired as a sergeant about a year and 4 months ago. Over half of that career was spent as POA leadership, and I spent many nights here at council meetings addressing issues that are very similar to what's going on right now. I can remember at the age of 21 years old coming to council meetings as a young police officer and watching as a police chief was asked questions about a new development going in, whether there was any impact from that development going to be on the police services and the police department, and watched the chief of police at that time say, oh, absolutely not, there would be no impact on the police department. And that happened for years and years and years as this city continued to grow. We had 86 police officers back then when I was 21 years old, and we don't have that many more now, but our city is a lot bigger and crime is a lot worse than what it was back then. Youth services, we've had plenty of youth services in this town. I'm not against them. We built a beautiful water park that can't fund itself. We continue to fund that. We've had sports programs, football and baseball, you name it, all kinds of programs, and they're underutilized. Once upon a time they were full, but they're underutilized. And here we want to continue to add more programs instead of beefing up the ones that we currently have and getting participation in those. Something has to be done to correct that rather than simply diverting money to the private sector to come in and spend public funds for as a cash cow. They're looking at the city as a cash cow. And what guarantees do we have that those programs are going to succeed? What plan have we seen, their projections, and how far out they're going to go, and make sure that these programs are going to succeed in our city when many programs have failed in the past? We're making the same errors that we always have. We can't continue to do that. The voters were told that this was going to be a police tax, that this was going to fund the police department and code enforcement. That was the bill of sale. That's what I voted on. And come 2020, if my council does not do the right thing, I'm retired and I'm not opposed to getting a shave and a haircut and putting a suit back on and jumping in the ring. And I will unseat one of you. Do the right thing.
Sal Sabrante, followed by Mark Jordan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I thought I'd start, I have a prepared statement, but in listening to Dawn, one of the things that I recognize is you put in money for marketing. Now, when you put in money for marketing, that means for growth of revenue. That's not reflected anywhere. So if you don't have a safe city, first of all, how are you going to get growth? What good is marketing going to do? You're going to market the crime in Antioch? Crazy. You guys determine how safe we are, and that's scary sometimes. I hope you will support the fact that Antioch needs to reduce crime in order to make it a better city. A safe city allows for a lot of good things to happen. The citizens of Antioch willingly supported and voted in a 1% tax increase in order to have a safer city. I did not vote for Measure W because I felt that the City Council would do a bait and switch, meaning they would say the money was to reduce our crime in this crime-ridden city and then do something else with the money. Since Measure C, though, our crime rate has dropped. The data overwhelmingly shows that increased police presence reduces the incidences of crime, yet the people who make the decision, you, the City Council, ignore what the voters at the time supported, reduction in crime by increasing our police force. And you spin it in a way that we need to spend money for your pet programs. I guess you'll feel this brings you votes. Now, one council member of our mayor is an expert in crime. The expert you have tells you that if you give him the money he has put in for what he's put in for, that he'll reduce crime. I know when I ran the steel mill, if I had a direct report said, give me this and I'll get you that, and that's what I was looking for, I gave him that. Oh, and by the way, if you didn't perform, then we got someone else to do the job and do it properly. But I don't think any of you guys are experts. The expert says do the 115. Unfortunately, with all the smoke and mirrors, you know, if I held people accountable. It was very recognizable when they didn't do their job. But you guys, you'll just do smoke and mirrors and be spin masters. I researched 14 studies today. One of them had some anecdotal data that said increased police force does not reduce crime. 13 of them had statistical evidence showing that increased police forces, there's a Princeton study, there's a study in London, there's 14 of these studies. I'm telling you, please vote in favor of giving the Antioch Police Force the means to carry out its mission properly. Remember, you're the one who determines how safe we are, whether we can walk the streets or not. Thank you.
Mark Jordan, followed by Ralph Garrell.
My name is Mark Jordan. I live here in town. I own a business. I read your budget. I enjoyed reading the budget, Don. I would recommend that we eliminate words like other and that anagrams be referenced with footnotes. It would make it easier for somebody that doesn't look at the budget all the time. I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the situation that we're in. I was a supporter of Measure C. I was a proponent of Measure O, which taxes my rentals. I also supported Measure W. I've read a couple of letters about reducing youth crime. Based on the statistics that I have, I would say that your member of the school board didn't do her homework. Since 2013 to 2018, the juvenile crime rate has dropped from 19% of the total crimes in town to 9%. It's more than a 50% drop. If you include those that run up to the age of 25, you've got a crime rate drop of 32% in that bracket. That's pretty significant. So you're dealing with a small number of juveniles, and you need to ask yourself, if you spend this money on juvenile programs, and there are many within the city already, what's your rate of return? Right now, because I am a real estate broker, I can tell you that, and one of the members knows this, that if you take a cookie cutter 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Pittsburgh or Brentwood, they tend to sell anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 more than they do in Antioch right now. That's lost revenue that you're not getting. You're doing a very good job on working on sales tax, promoting business within the community, but the only other major source of revenue that you have is real property. You need to put the money into code enforcement. You need more code enforcement officers, and you need more police. New York City went through this in the 70s. The question they always ask themselves, what brings in the criminal? Is it the criminal that comes first or the broken window? And the answer is always the same. It doesn't matter. Police will raise the property values here in town. Code enforcement officers will raise the property values. It will produce more income. And then with that additional income, we can look at additional programs. As far as the youth programs go, I don't see a plan. I just say we would like something. And if you're going to divert money to any project at all, could we please see a plan? Thank you.
Ralph Garrell, followed by Kim Trupiano.
Good evening. Ralph Garrow, lifelong resident of Antioch and local business owner. Our motto is opportunity now. The main thing is that we've got to attract employers who are going to come here, locate businesses, provide more jobs, make it for a more vital community. I've talked to you about Measure W before. When that part of the budget is considered, I believe that roughly 80% allocation for police and code enforcement, and then the 20% for youth services and other services is a ratio that you could consider, like many of the people have already said here. We need to have a safe community, and we need the perception as we market the community that it is a safe community with crime that's going down and where businesses want to locate. So in addition, be sure to pay what you can to pay down the unfunded pension liability so we don't get down the road and go out of business as a city. Thank you.
Kim Trupiano, followed by Tony Tiscarino.
I'm going to have to lower the mic. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. My name is Kim Trupiano, and I'm a resident of Clayton, but I'm a longtime volunteer at Antioch Animal Shelter. And I'm here to kind of add to your enhanced budget. We are in desperate need of a volunteer and a rescue coordinator. These were positions that the shelter had many years ago, full-time positions. People were laid off, volunteers took their place, but they haven't been replaced, and we're asking animal control officers who have plenty of other things to do to try to get these animals out. We're at full capacity right now. We're losing animals because we don't have room. There's health issues, including kennel cough and lots of other situations that are not being addressed, and it's all because we just can't seem to get the animals out in enough time. And I just want to say a few words about one particular animal, and his name is Carl, and he was euthanized yesterday because we just didn't have, I guess, the resources or the time to get him out of the shelter, get him in front of rescue organizations, and give him the opportunity. He was a puppy that was adoptable, and he lost his mind, kennel stress. So I'm begging you to please consider adding some additional hours for volunteer and rescue coordinator. It could easily be done by one person. We love the animals. There are many of us volunteers here today, and we only have their best interest at heart. Thank you.
Tony Tiscarino left, but he's got something for me to read, followed by Kenneth Kent. I support the enhanced budget of hiring 115 police officers by 2021 fiscal year. This would also include hiring additional code enforcement. The vast majority of Measure W funds would help sustain these expenditures. Kenneth Kent, followed by Warren Lutz.
Hello. Thank you, City Council. Ken Kent, I'm a 5th grade teacher here in Antioch. I've been working here for 20 years, and I would just like to encourage you, please, don't make youth services an afterthought. I see students every day who go home and they have 2 things to keep them busy: the neighborhood and Fortnite, which is a violent video game. We need other outlets. Let's give students and families support services, counseling services, recreational services, employment opportunities. Our school district right now is going through some cuts where they're laying off potential librarians and media techs at high schools. Media techs whose job it is to help process work permits, to find scholarships for students, to recommend, first-generation college students, to give them the support to tell them they can do this. And we're losing these services, or potentially losing these services was voted in at our last school board meeting. But the City Council can work with us to help provide another avenue. And it can't all be done from one aspect, that we come in different directions to give our communities the supports they need. Supports that can lessen the burden on our police services. By all means, I am strongly in favor of police services. I have many police officers in my family, and we need to address that issue. But please do not make quality of life services an afterthought. Thank you.
Warren Lutz.
Thank you, Council. So when surveyed, Antioch residents said the most serious problem in our city is crime in general. Second was gangs and youth violence. I totally agree. This is why I stand in 100% with the majority of the law enforcement community on this issue. 2 years ago, more than 100 California sheriffs, police chiefs, and DAs wrote then-Governor Jerry Brown advocating for after-school programs, stating, "We know that there is no substitute for tough law enforcement, but we also know from years of crime-fighting experience and rigorous research evidence that to safeguard our communities, we need to take steps to prevent kids from ever becoming involved in crime in the first place, such as providing high-quality after-school programs. Research from California across the nation," they wrote, "shows that after-school programs can prevent crime and truancy, cut drug and alcohol use, reduce teen pregnancy, and increase school day attendance and academic achievement." So apparently the world of law enforcement agrees after-school programs reduce crime and makes communities safer. But in recent days, any mention of expanding youth programs in Antioch, which is included in Measure W ballot language, seems to offend many in our police community and the supporters. I want more police on our streets too. But we had years of Measure C funding, and our police department is roughly the same size as it was when I moved here 3 years ago. And yet, lo and behold, crime is dropping. As our police chief told this council just last month, since 2012, violence and thefts, collectively referred to as Part 1 crimes, have declined every year, and 2018 saw the lowest number of violent crimes in 10 years, and an 11.5% drop from 2017. I realize Antioch has a long way to go to get our police department staffed on par with other agencies, but we have much, much further to go when it comes to youth programs, which studies have proven would actually help our police department in their all too important mission to help keep our community safe. Antioch has one of the highest proportion of residents under 18 in the entire Bay Area, yet is among the furthest away from major job centers. It has no YMCA, no Boys and Girls Club, and a community center that's empty most evenings. Where are the parents, people say? Well, they're at their jobs, on the road, trying to put food on the table. I coach CYO basketball, and a lot of kids can't participate because their parents can't drive them to practice or games. I say we help them out for the good of the community. We have $14 million in Measure W money coming. We need to set aside enough money specifically for youth programs and increasing access to the community center and community-based organizations. Our children deserve it. Thank you.
Shamira Furman. Followed by Stephanie Lopez.
So a lot of what I'm going to say is going to echo what Warren said, so excuse anyone that has to listen to it all over again. I understand the need for veterinary staff, especially a good one. I've worked in veterinary medicine for almost 20 years. That covered general practice and specialty, emergency specialty, so I definitely understand that. I also understand that your police feel underpaid. I literally had to kick 2 police officers out of my uncle's house as they complained about not being able to, and I quote, make a 6-figure income unless they do any sort of overtime. I had to kick them out because they decided to discuss this as my uncle was receiving CPR for the 2nd time. And I had to watch him die for the 2nd time out of 3 times that I had to go through that night. And your police officers with no morale decided to complain about their wages while I went through that. And I had to kick them out, and they looked at me as if I did something wrong. People in this community that aren't police officers are forced to work multiple jobs, and most people that are in this community can't even afford to have a retirement plan that police staff are currently wanting more of. A lot of families in this area aren't even sure that they could retire. So I think some of your police staff need to understand that what they currently have already is a luxury that most of us don't even understand. If we focus on building communities versus continuing the narrative that this community is dangerous, which I can assure you that is not, unless you only stay in Antioch. I come from a community, because I am imported into Antioch for the last 10 years, that some of you guys wouldn't even walk in, let alone drive with your locked doors. Also, even, excuse me, the only thing that I don't feel safe with is my cars. Have my car stolen in Antioch too many times, just recently. But when I tell you I call the police, I got barely any help at all. I once had to call the police on a neighbor of ours who was abusing her 6-year-old child. That child was completely abused during the call when I made it to the police officers, and after they left because they did nothing. Those of us that read the fine print understood what this money was being spread out for. That is the only reason I voted for it. If it were just to go to the police, I would not have voted for it, and we should not be looked at or deemed less than because we read the fine print and understood that this money were to be spread out, not just the police officers. You get what you sign, or you should read it or vote what you, excuse me. That's why reading what you sign or vote for matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Stephanie Lopez, followed by Kenny Turnage.
Hello, council members. Mr. Thorpe, I was not planning on coming here. I was just walking my dog and I ran into Mr. Thorpe. Anyway, all I want to say is that I grew up here and I'm a mentally ill patient, and I think we need more police officers. It is, I used to work for the Sheriff's Department, East Bay Veteran Emergency, and also I was a kennel worker at one time. I feel sorry, I'm so sorry about Carl. We definitely need more police officers because I used to be able to walk the streets when I was a kid, and I'm permanently ill. I definitely cannot do that anymore, especially since I am a single woman who is own my own house, and I am afraid to walk the streets because even though I have to, I have mild dementia and I cannot work, and even though I do, we need more police officers, code enforcement officers, especially downtown. I see the railroad tracks over there off A Street. There's all these homeless people, and there's a car over there, and they drive over there, and there's kids living in cars with their children, women with children with their kids, and that's messed up. And there's high crime rate. There's definitely from Richmond, Oakland, lots of crime coming here, and it really messes me up, makes me mad. And Antioch is not like what it used to be a long time ago when I was here. I'm 35 years old, and I lived here since I was 5 years old, and it is not right to see how it has gone. And it makes me really mad to see this way. And kids should not live this way in Antioch. It needs to be turned around. It needs to be turned around immediately. We need more police officers, like I said. And I'm glad that I'm here and I ran into you, Mr. Thorpe. I did not mean to come here. And I'm thanking everyone here for being here. I can't believe I have this much time to talk. I never talked this fast before in my life. I never have. I still can't believe it's at yellow. Anyway, we need more police officers. We need police officers. We need more police officers. We need more police officers. We need it now. I don't know all this budget. I do not understand any of these numbers, but the budget needs to more police officers, more court enforcement officers, more rangers, not forest rangers, but anyway, people want to be police officers. Kids, you should be a police officer. I was a sheriff's ranger. I was also a lead detention worker at the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department, okay? I became a lead immediately, and then a ranger, and then I had seizures. I was 45 days in a coma, okay? And then all of a sudden, every day is a new day. I just don't understand why every day is a new day for me. That's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Sorry.
Kenny Turnage, followed by Jessica Jolett.
Okay, I wrote 3 of these. I don't know which one I just pulled out of my pocket, so we're all going to find out together. Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Kenny Turnage, and I'm a local business owner as well as a longtime resident of this city. At no point have I ever felt that the city of Antioch is below average, nor do I think its residents should accept being below average. But that is exactly what is told to us. We should accept being below average when it comes to our safety and the cleanliness of our city. There is a tax that was passed that all citizens and visitors to the city are paying. It is mine and many others' opinion that could not be here today because they were unable to attend a meeting that is during normal work hours, that this tax should first and foremost be spent on items that affects every citizen until we have dug ourselves out of the below average hole we have sunken into. Our police staff is less than 0.9 officers per 1,000 residents, which is well below the county average of 1.2 officers per 1,000. We have a city plan which actually states we should have more than 1.2 per 1,000, but yet we are trying to achieve the low standards of average. But you as a council are willing to settle for less and spend money on youth and quality of life services that benefit some of the residents, but not the whole of the community, when the whole of the community is in dire need. As far as I know, the police chief is an employee of the city. As an employee, he should be given the ability to do his job correctly and also be given direction at times as to what the city needs. We need traffic and roadways to be safe. Every time I'm the first person at a stoplight, I put a quarter, is this thing going out? I put a quarter on my dashboard to remind myself intersections in Antioch are like playing Frogger. And when you need to pay attention, even when it's your turn to go. The light turns green, I look both ways, wait for the person behind me to honk, then I proceed forward. We have far too many reckless drivers on our roadways endangering us and our children. We have had more of our children killed on our roadways than of violent crimes. Over the past 4 years, our crimes committed by and on our youths are down by almost 50% and trending better. We are looking at spending on an improving item for one sector when something as our roadways is getting worse and affecting everyone. Roadways are just one example of this issue. Please give our police the money to get us above average amount of officers, even though we deserve to be better than average. But do so with one glaring demand from council and the city manager, by telling the police that we want traffic enforcement. It seems we are having a rollover accident a week.
Thank you. You must have grabbed the wrong one.
Actually, you guys are probably happy I grabbed that one.
Jessica Jolette, followed by Harry Thurston.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council and staff for allowing me to speak today. My name is Jess Gillette, and I'm the director of Lift Up Contra Costa, which is a coalition of 9 organizations and labor partners that are deeply committed to building political power in our county. We envision an engaged democracy in which community members have access to these important policy decisions like local planning and development and budget. And together we fight for policies and elected officials that are responsive to the challenges our over 100,000 residents that we represent face. Over the past 2 months, the City Council has been holding study sessions before council meetings at 4 p.m. And while many of our community members were interested in weighing in on the city budget, it was not feasible for them to attend such early meetings. The folks that are most deeply impacted by the decisions that you make are working people. Their parents and their people who travel very far to make a living. And wouldn't it be great for Antioch if those closest to the pain were most deeply involved? To this end, I'm hoping the City Council can consider innovative ways to engage our community in such important conversations, maybe like a Saturday study session. Working with our coalition partners at the Safe Return Project, ACE, and the County Labor Council, we've been hosting community conversations about the city budget, and we have heard residents reaffirm the results of the Quality of Life Community Survey, reporting that priority areas were public safety, blight, and youth programs, and that the community is in need of services and improvements and capital investments that will address these issues. Currently, the Antioch budget allocates 75% of our general fund to the police department. Therefore, only a quarter of our public revenues are spent on all the other very important city services we need, such as public works projects and significant economic development. Sadly, police services alone cannot make us safe. We also need community initiatives and investments in the quality of life here in Antioch, like maintaining parks, streets and roads, robust recreation programs, internships, and community partnerships that engage and empower our youth. And you have an opportunity to create a budget that will help fund a thriving and whole city. So let's move beyond a reactive police safety posture to a proactive approach that promotes health and well-being, like internships, after-school programs, and summer camps. It can mean refurbishing our swimming facilities or making them free, more library services with extended hours. There's many ways to prevent crime and to uplift our community, and we can do this through adapting result-based programs that can reach much more people and cost much less than police services. Rather than over-relying on our police, we can make our community safer by investing in programs, and this approach alleviates the burden on our department and the unrealistic expectation that police can solve all our woes. Together we can create opportunities for our residents, and not just to survive in our city, but to thrive in Antioch. Thank you for your time.
Harry Thurston.
I'm Harry Thurston, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. I voted for Measure W for a couple of reasons, mainly to increase the quality of life in Antioch. That was the main drive. Most people I talked to thought the police was part of that, code enforcement was part of that, and youth services was part of that. I understand the police, they have done a great job the last couple of years. Our crime is down. The average citizen thinks that crime in the city is traffic. They're tired of the traffic on the roads. They're scared to death of the roads. You talk about somebody coming to buy a house, they drive down Lone Tree Avenue and see somebody going 65 miles an hour down Lone Tree. They're going to immediately think the wrong thing. And I think that's the greatest impact right now as far as crime to the per average person is the traffic, and that's what I get all the time. Neighborhood crime is down, and that's good, and again, the police have done a great job. But that's one part of quality of life, and I think we do need to fund the police more with more officers, but they need to focus more on traffic, I think. Secondly, quality of life. Code enforcement. You know, crime follows the issues around code enforcement. We need to clean the city up. We suffered 2008. We lost that advantage. We're behind. The train has left the station. There's too much blight in the city right now. Right now in your budget, I still feel code enforcement is way underfunded from what it should be. That's a #1 priority. Like I said, if you want to improve the look of the city, get rid of the blight in the city. That will bring everything up, and that'll bring everybody else begin to feel like the city, it's their city. They start having a piece of the community. And the third thing of quality of life is youth services. We need that. Yes, crime is down with the youth services, but we need to think about quality of life for the youth. We got to think about the future. We need to supply them someplace other than go home and play video games at home. They need a path forward outside of school. So those are my 3 things I would like to see this budget concentrate on as far as quality of life is concerned. And I am concerned about the year end at 24, 25, 25, 26, we going down. There needs to be some balance between, I think, the balance and the enhanced budget. But those 3 pieces of quality of life needs to be addressed. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your service too. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speaker cards?
No more received.
Thank you. This is before council. I'll open it up for council comments or questions. Mayor Pro Tem Motz.
Don, could you explain, the perception of the city is that the police department is 75% of the budget, but there was an action taken past year by this council regarding an allocation. I think actually that was brought forward by the Measure C Oversight Committee that kind of changed that. So could you explain that to us in the community?
The city had a new cost allocation and fee study last year. We hadn't had one since 2005. Under the existing study, all departments in the city, whether it be in the general fund or an external fund, shared a cost of what we called citywide administration for the cost of, say, my department doing payroll for everybody. So, Public Works got a share of that, the water fund, recreation, etc. Under the new study, when we updated the amounts, because all it had been done since 2005 was adjusting by some CPI and some other budget adjustment factors, it was recommended by the consultant, because of practice of majority of California cities, is that you don't allocate internally within the general fund, because all you're doing essentially is moving $500 from one department and putting it in another department. And you're just shifting it around within the same fund. The purpose of a cost allocation plan is to recover those fees, essentially a billing to the outside funds to reimburse the general fund for providing payroll, for example. And so council agreed to remove the allocations that were occurring just within the general fund departments. So with the police department, and this is irrespective of the Measure C, that had to do with a calculation on Measure C expenditures, the police department tended to fluctuate in prior years because of this cost allocation factor, anywhere between 72 and 75%. Some years it dropped down to 71% of the total general fund expenditures. Because we've removed those citywide administration costs from the police department and any other division within the general fund, that dropped. As you will see, I put pie charts on page 15 of the graphs. In the 1920 baseline for police and animal services, it made that drop down to 66%. But then all the other departments, those percentages shifted as well. And then the 1920 enhanced at 65%. And if we were to pretend that the cost allocation still occurred in those divisions in 1920, calculate that. Sorry, let me just find my note page here. So if we were to put in the cost allocation plan what was determined as a new plan, and we added that back into the balance and charged it to the police department, the PD and animal services would be 70%, and then if we added it to the baseline, it would be 71%. So keeping those in there would keep in the neighborhood of the percentages that had existed, but because we've removed those citywide administration charges from all divisions in the general fund, it shifted how everybody's percentages looked as a share of those expenditures. It's a little bit confusing. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Thank you, I appreciate that. One other question. We currently have how many code enforcement?
We have a code enforcement manager, and then we have 3 code enforcement officers.
So in both the balanced and the enhanced, we're looking at adding, well, actually in the enhanced,
so it's the same total number of bodies. In the enhanced, it's 3 code enforcement officers and 1 senior for a total of 4. In the balanced budget, it just makes it a total of 4 additional on top of what we already have staffed.
so then we would be at 7 code enforcement?
Correct.
Code enforcement? And then the management position manages the code enforcement department.
Right, and that already exists. And then, additionally with that, as part of, if council recalls, when we did the staffing discussion, was adding full-time general laborers. We already have the quote-unquote abatement team, the 2 general laborers, but adding 2 full-time in lieu of using part-time. So that also expands the code enforcement division. So the majority of, on page 13 under community development, of the staffing in here, other than the planner, all falls within the code enforcement division.
So clarify me to the abatement team. So we were taking 2 part-time positions. And
Well, there was 2 full-time general laborers that the city has full-time employees that are part of that, but then they also utilize part-time general laborers as well.
Okay, so we have 2 existing, and the recommendation is taking those part-time and making them 1.
And making it into
1 full FTE, correct?
Well, it's 2 general labor positions in the balanced budget. Initially, if you recall, when we came with the staffing ask, we had asked for, I believe it was just the 1 general labor, and expanding on that to really expand the program would be the 2 general laborers. So if you see on page 13, general laborers 2, but then it's offset by part-time help savings.
Okay, so in the balanced, so then what would our total, if we looked at the balanced budget, what would be our total laborers then?
So that should make it 4 general laborers.
4,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Mayor Pro Tem Motz.
And maybe this is for the chief. Can an ACA also work as a rescue coordinator? Thank you, Chief.
The short answer is, first of all, Mayor and members of council, thank you. The short answer is no. Typically an ACA is someone who cares for the animals, cleans the kennels, does the dishes, feeds, walks, provides enrichment activities. They are typically, currently as we stand, we don't have enough ACAs to even provide the level of service for the number of animals that we have. So this is just enabling us to fulfill that need, but they wouldn't have additional time to fulfill that role.
So would 2 ACAs give you the necessary staff to make sure that the animals and the shelter is running as efficiently as possible?
It would make it more efficient, and it would allow us, now keep in mind the request was for every full-time ACA we would reduce 2 of the part-time staff. So my goal would be if we were to bring on 2 full-time ACAs, we would remove 4 of the part-time, and so we would still have 2 full-time, but then we would have, what would that be, 6 additional part-time, and through that we would stagger them out so that we could provide that level of service.
Is it possible to, I'm just talking about the rescue coordinator position, is there a way to, a part-time position or a contract position of some kind? Have you ever looked at that as far as helping facilitate moving the animals into, getting them out to homes and to shelters or to other agencies?
Well, we actually have someone who does that now, and so okay. It's moved from different people over the years, but we currently do have an ACO who is currently filling that role right now.
Okay, so you have somebody who's working as a rescue coordinator at the shelter now?
Part of her responsibility is working as a rescue coordinator, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other comments or questions? If nobody else, I will make some comments. As I look at the budget, I came out as Measure W passed and said that I wanted to get to 115 police officers, and would like to support the police department and the chief. Chief and I had a conversation yesterday regarding his requests. In the balanced approach, the records technician goes from 2 to 1. His request was for 2. As I talked to him, I realized and understood how important that second tech was. From the standpoint of recent legislation that's passed and ongoing requests that are coming in. So I would like to push for his request there. We discussed the 6 CSOs that were in his ask and removed, and I'd like to see those CSOs put in. Right now we have no jailers. Or we don't have enough jailers from the CSO standpoint. So we have police officers that are having to work the jail as well as take those that they arrest all the way to Martinez, which means they're not on our streets doing the work that's needed to be done. And so Chief has said that the first 2 CSOs would increase that opportunity. The next 2 would be able to help support those calls that are necessary for our officers, and 2 more would be able to really be a support. So I'm in favor of adding those back in to the chief's requests, which would be adding to the records technician, adding the CSOs, getting to 115 by the 2021. We would get to the 115 sworn officers, but that would give, and I'd even be in favor of moving the animal care attendants from the 1 to the 2 to support. So those are the things that I look at from the balanced budget. I also believe in youth services, and in working on the youth ad hoc committee, understand that we do not have youth services in our community. One of the big things that was mentioned was we don't have drop-in services from 3 to 6 o'clock. We don't have places for our youth to go, and so working on trying to figure that in, but. Supporting the police department is looking at the balanced approach, and adding the police officers would be my request. Other comments, questions? Councilmember Overtalk.
I don't know how we want to do this since it doesn't seem to be a lot of conversation on it.
Do we want to take it by category and start making some determinations? I mean, is that the direction we're supposed to go?
It's however...
Make a vote? Okay, then I'm going to make a, I'm going to, thank you, I'm going to recommend that we accept on page 5 of the budget, the police request from Chief Tammany Brooks. That's my motion.
And that's for the enhanced?
Page 5, that's it. Then. Okay, recommendation, motion, whatever it is. So if I get a second, we can discuss it.
I will second the motion.
Thank you.
So we have a first and a second. Looking at the police.
I'm sorry.
Please.
I'm not clear what.
No, I'm making a motion that we accept the police chief's recommendation on page 5 of the enhanced budget. That's my motion.
So I still have some questions in some other areas, so I can't make a decision based on some questions I need to ask.
This is a draft budget. This is not the budget that we're going to approve.
That's why I asked the question, so I need clarification.
I was going to say, since you're in the study session now, you can just discuss what it is that you think you want to do as a group, but you don't have to make the formal action.
So it's just a recommendation.
So the recommendation is to approve, to move and add to the budget the enhanced recommendations of the chief into the budget.
That's correct.
Questions?
Well, first of all, I'm super concerned. I mean, we're looking at the enhanced budget, and it shows, as Dawn has so nicely explained, shows us in about 5 years not having any more money. So I'm not sure that's a really good way to go forward. I think looking at the balanced budget, which, thank you, City Manager, Mr. Brunel, for coming forward with kind of a, I think, meeting of the minds on a lot of the requests from staff and from council. So I think we should really kind of look at the balanced budget. This is where what keeps us from, maintains our 20% as far as our reserves, and also lets us try to address some of the needs for the police department, code enforcement, just across the board. So I'd like for us to kind of decide which budget we're going to be working off of before we, that would be my recommendation, that before we go forward.
Other comments?
I had some questions for other departments.
Councilmember Wilson, go ahead.
Is it possible to ask other departments? Are we locked into?
No, this is an open discussion, please.
Okay. I do have some questions concerning economic development. And Kwame had questions about your budget requests. Oh, you're going here. Wherever's comfortable. So here's, I have a few questions. So from what I've been reading, you originally had requested $775,000 to be added on top of your baseline budget, correct?
In a nutshell, yes.
And then of that 775, 500 was going to be allocated to your marketing plan, if I understood that correct.
That is incorrect. Actually, the additional $775,000, the predominant amount was $700,000 for marketing, which included continuous rebranding, media purchases, and things like that. So $700,000 was marketing, $75,000 was for programming. Those seem to be the two large amounts that we have been brought to the surface.
So in your overall budget, subtracting out the marketing piece, you've made a couple of requests. I'd like for you to talk me through the line. Like there was some assessments, doing some research. Can you talk me through some of those items that you wanted, that was going to be encompassed in that amount?
I can.
So then talk about it in terms of, let's just take that marketing piece out.
Okay.
So
well, I have prepared a presentation for today to go over the method to my madness with creating the economic development budget, because
At an advantage or a disadvantage, the Economic Development Department has not had a budget here, realized in probably the last 10 years, where activities can actually take place regarding economic development. So if you don't mind, I would like to just kind of run you through hopefully a brief PowerPoint presentation that I did prepare. And I need to see if it's here real quick. So
That's fine with
one
my
second.
fellow council members.
No, because we don't want to show. It's all, oh, sorry. How does it?
If you can't get your presentation up, if you can.
Oh, it's here. Yeah.
Okay.
I saw it.
Can you pass this across?
I do apologize. There were some last-minute changes that we had to make to the budget, so it was not part of the presentation packet. However, there are copies on the back for the public if you do want to follow along, actually as well. So. What I wanted to do is I wanted to take a look at the economic development budget compared to the recently adopted vision and strategic plan that was recently adopted by the council, I believe at the last city council meeting. Goal 3 mentions to support a sustainable economic development department throughout the city. So taking kind of like a compare and contrast, if you will, of how the visions and goals of the council line up to some of the budget items that I have. It's not going to line up line for line, but this is going to kind of provide you with some background on what I would like to see accomplished within economic development here in Antioch. So obviously, one of the vision goals is marketing material to promote new development and revitalization. This can be done through economic development study areas, showing an example of what I would like to see done at one of 4 or 5 employment centers or areas that would help spur job growth. This is a 3D digital rendering of the Wildflower Station project that's currently under construction. This was created by both the developer and an architect. What they essentially did was looked at the approval process, what was approved through the Planning Commission and the City Council, and created this very short video. Hopefully it will play. Here you go. So ideally, I would love to see this happen at a few of our employment areas, and I'll go over the employment areas a little bit later in this presentation, but this really addresses how we can market those employment centers, those job areas, to hopefully spur excitement by both the landowner, developers, and future companies, and to bring in businesses to the area. So this is just an example. This will take you through the proposed development that has multifamily as well as single-family residences that was on top of the hill. This is the area here that's been slated for retail and also some commercial office aspects. So ideally, I would love to see this happen on some of the employment areas. I will go ahead and click through this, hopefully, to get to the next slide. Another thing would be creating business retention and expansion and attraction programs. This can be done by incorporating customer relation management software. Ideally, we need to get to a point where we're working smarter and not necessarily harder. Having a CRM, the customer relation management software, will allow my staff to keep track of companies that are interested in coming to Antioch, as well as helping us keep track of the existing companies that are here to ensure that when they are ready to grow and expand, we know that up front we have the means to provide constant communication with them as well, and we're not going to miss a beat, hopefully, with them. Also with this, I would like to establish a minimum 20 company visits per year with my staff and I, and hopefully also developing a staff team when it's critical that we get out in front of a company that might want to leave Antioch, that I would invite members of of our Economic Development Commission, my staff, the City Council, as well as the Chamber, to go out and see if we can take a preemptive strike to keep them here. Some of the elements that we need to start doing for economic development here are the best practices. Since Antioch has not had an economic development director in the past 10 plus years, a lot of data that should have been collected was not collected. A lot of the data that needed to be here and worked with consultants was simply not done. So we're almost starting from zero. So with that information, I would love to see these elements here added within the budget and provided here. So like I said, working with employers, bringing this type of information into our databases, knowing commuter profiles. We're looking at some BART data. They're very good at collecting data and looking at the data. We didn't realize that the majority of Antioch riders are actually getting off at the 3 major BART stations in San Francisco. That's a very long track. Looking at the cargo ships that go by here. Is there a way that we can look at what's being transported and shipped by here to maybe do some value-added proposition to that material? Knowing what the ground contamination is currently in one of our most talked about areas, which is the Wilbur corridor. It was always been slated for heavy industrial. Some of those areas have been contaminated because over the years, as you know, manufacturing has changed what's allowed, and unfortunately, as people were doing business back in the 30s and 40s, even up into the 70s, the environmental aspect of what they did was not exactly good for the ground. Also looking at doing some financing of, like basically a financing toolbox, seeing if there's real ways of adding some incentives to attract businesses, to help businesses expand, and really just help businesses be better businesses. And once again, the property database and also utilization of the PPP, the public-private partnership, is really key. Just to kind of show you some of the data that's out there. This is 2015 data. It's from On the Map. It's a census product. Looking at data like this from 2015, a lot has changed since 2015, believe it or not. So we would work with a consultant to make sure we get the most current data in something like this. So here you see a workforce for Antioch of 44,000. Meaning our outbound workforce, those are people that are commuting. It's almost 90% at 39,000 of that 44,000. Of the people that are employed here that live in Antioch is about 4,900. And here you'll see the employed, right here. So here you see the employed in Antioch is 21,000, so that's people that are coming in and working within the city. Now, once again, this is 2015 data, but we have about 16,000 people that are coming into Antioch on a daily basis at this time. And once again, you see the employed and living in Antioch is just under 5,000. So this is the type of data that we can work with to start really identifying companies where these people are commuting to. It's going to require a lot of digging deep into some data. It's not as simple as just saying, okay, you're getting off at a BART station here or there. We want to know where they're actually going to work. We want to be able to get in front of those CEOs so we can start making a difference to provide and create Antioch like an employment center. Next one here is to facilitate the development of enterprise zones and employment areas. As I mentioned, it lines up with my budget as far as doing area studies. So an area would be East Lone Tree Way, that's north of the JCPenney's Slatton Ranch area. Hillcrest BART, as you know, there's about 200 acres that's just to the north of the BART station. That should be seriously considered and enhance the existing specific plan that's there. Looking at the Summersville area, looking at Wilbur Avenue corridor, as I mentioned, and of course our downtown. The wonderful thing about Antioch is it's so large. The unfortunate thing about Antioch is we can't treat each one of these employment areas as the same. It simply won't work. One concept does not fit all. So here you go. This is the area that's north of JCPenney's. Excuse my rendering there. It was really quick. And this is also the area around the BART station that I mentioned, which is about 200 acres. Working with the landowners, developers, companies, multifamily developers, we can really activate these areas to do something that is very rare in the Bay Area. Antioch has, and I would say East County, but I'm going to focus on Antioch, has a true gem in the reverse commute. And that's something that the BART trains are leaving out here full, they're coming back empty. So if we can entice people in the greater Bay Area to relocate their companies here, that would be, I think, a definite win-win. We need to get an understanding of the infrastructure, the inventory of the infrastructure, doing things like a fiber optic study to find out, okay, if we have these employment centers, how can we get them activated? How can we make sure that the right infrastructure is in the ground so that these companies can not just say connect to the internet faster, but they can communicate with each other faster. They can do that by way of something called dark fiber. Like I said, once again, looking at the contracts, creating contracts for economic development study areas, I've identified those. Looking at promotion efforts for tourism. we want to continue to make improvements to our economic development website. We just launched AntiochIsOpportunity.com this week, or I'm sorry, on April 2nd, and it's doing really well. And so we want to continue some of the marketing items to make sure that the data does not get stale, the information does not get stale. We always want to keep it moving and changing so that when somebody looks at Antioch, they see the best things about Antioch. This is what the new website looks like. This was through our rebranding company. It's like I said, the website is AntiochIsOpportunity.com. Looking at other elements that I've seen from other cities, the Petaluma Star. It's economic development. I think it's the economic development staff there in Petaluma. They put out this nice profile of companies and businesses in their area, a business toolkit, if you will, on how to do better business in Petaluma. Another thing here is Visit Concord. They have a really nice website. It's worked along in partnership with their chamber and I think Visitors Bureau. But it's all those things that Antioch really could have, and we just have not had the means of doing that just yet. We want to make sure that we are taking advantage of the people that we have there, the landowners, the business owners, developers, the brokers. We're going to host broker events, and we're also going to really try to improve and facilitate improvement districts throughout the city. I'm almost done. Do you have a question? Or?
No,
okay. I could definitely take questions. Actually, I'll take questions before we go into what the numbers look like.
So it sounds like you need funding to get the data that you need to make sure we know what the infrastructure is, what we have, what we don't have. I mean, I really like this map of where it shows the employment, who's commuting out, and who's staying here. That's really good information. And it seems like we brought you in and didn't give you some of the tools that you need to bring in companies, to bring in more jobs, because we need more revenue, more jobs at the end of the day. But to do that, we need to equip you with the right tools. I definitely would like to, I understand that 775 was brought down in the balanced budget to like 275. I mean, I ideally would like it to go up to at least 500, so you can get a lot of this done and get this economic development work up and running, because we all ran on economic development. We all asked for economic development director. We got you here and didn't give you much to work with to get us going. So I definitely understand the research that you need to be able to go and get the employers that cater to our strengths.
Correct. Yeah. So the idea is having those employment centers is what might work for the East Lone Tree area might not work around the BART station. So it's really important that we understand that data, understand the background to it, so that we can work with a consultant to say, okay, consultant XYZ, what does it take to have this industry survive in this area? Okay. And then hopefully we can align zoning and things like that to it as they start to get developed.
So you're definitely looking into, as we keep, we hear people say to us all the time, Wilbur Corridor, what's going on with that? What's going on with downtown? But we need to do definitely more of a deep dive research on what opportunities are there that we can offer out, and make sure we can just make assumptions like, oh, we have the Deepwater Channel, but you just said some of the land is contaminated.
I mean, actually, how would we actually activate
How do we
that?
work around that?
Correct.
So I would definitely support how do we get you the resources you need to bring that revenue and bring the job centers. I'm glad you talked about the reverse commute and bringing job centers here. So I mean, I just was curious why it was brought down so low, and
there you go.
But I was trying to balance the budget, so.
I get that. But we also need, we need him to drive business here, to get revenue and bring jobs, and so we could add more things to our budget and make everybody happy.
Mayor Pro Tem Watts.
So, Kwame, would 500,000, I mean, does that still allow you to do some of the things you're talking about doing as far as the studies and the broadband, and does it facilitate,
It will. Now, what I'll show you here is the difference between, and unfortunately I didn't put the years on there, but the first column would be the 1920 year. Where's my mouse? This will be the 1920 year of enhanced. This will be the 2021 year of enhancement. So the enhanced budget here still shows about $700,000 going into the marketing. It's showing about $435,000 that would be available for the area studies, hopefully getting to 2 per year, per fiscal year. as well as looking at things like a PBID and fiber optic study within those areas there. Now this is only focusing on the 4 major areas of the budget. There's still other elements of the budget that were not changed from enhanced to balance, but this kind of gives you a snapshot of what I think the numbers that Director Merchant has placed in her budget to you.
Okay, so you think?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Councilmember Overchuk.
On this item, I'm in agreement with the city manager for the first year for the 275 and then doubling it the following year.
Mayor.
Councilmember Overchuk. I'm sorry, Councilmember Thorpe. You look like it.
Yeah. Councilmember Ogachuk had made a recommendation and Councilwoman Motz had made a recommendation. I somewhat agree with Councilwoman Motz that we need to kind of pick a budget or something that we're going to work off of before we start adding or cutting or.
Yeah, that would just be ideal, so we know, I mean, I know you guys are not voting this evening. However, we would like enough direction going forward that what we end up bringing you in June incorporates everything that you have consensus on. And for one, if you just pick, for example, the enhanced version of the police, that almost essentially picks the enhanced version of the entire budget, because the police staffing is 2.3 million of the 2.8 million of the 1920 budget, and most of the enhanced, other than economic development and the youth funding, is the staffing. And so, you know, what we did with the balance, we felt was a good mix of meeting all the priorities as stated, and realize for whatever version that you choose, a budget is not a static document that you adopt and never touch again. It's fluid. Even some of the 18-19 numbers might change by the time I bring it to you in June. There might be additional salary savings if someone leaves, or we might get a one-time revenue of some sort. We might learn at year end, hey, we're going to get a one-time payment of something next year. And at mid-year, for whatever you shall decide, you can always decide to reevaluate staffing. Hey, let's now add this position because now we've learned X, Y, Z. So the document itself, even once you adopt it in June, I just want to make it clear, it's always fluid, always able to be amended by council direction. So should you decide to add maybe what Sean's recommendation are and build in some more, you can say in a year at mid-year, let's review adding some of these other positions. Just wanted to, I did make an Excel spreadsheet that has the 1920, 2021 years of each budget. So as we talk, I can add in some numbers and see kind of how it affects the bottom line. It doesn't go out till 25, 26, just because those include assumptions of what the PERS rate's going to be each year. So, you know, it would kind of not be entirely accurate just to plug those in every year. So I can bring up that Excel spreadsheet and we can start going through that exercise as well.
To that question, I feel like we're kind of working from the balanced budget. I've heard Councilmember Overchuk talk about increasing the police from the balanced to the enhanced. I've heard a suggestion from the economic development from going, one was 0, staying with the balanced one on year 1, moving to doubling to 275 in year 2. Another option would be Councilmember raising it by 250 in year 1 and year 2. Is that correct, Councilmember Wilson? So if we just continue suggestions.
Can we pick a budget? I'm gonna second what Councilman Motz has suggested. If there's another individual who wants to agree to that, then we can move forward on that.
Going to make a motion, or do we need to?
Hold on just a second. What was Councilmember Mott's recommendation?
The baseline budget. The balanced budget. My apologies.
So we're working from the balanced budget. Is everybody okay with that?
Well, wait a second here. I started on the first one first. So in order to start the conversation, I started on the enhanced. So if we want to move to the baseline, to the balanced one, that's fine. But we had started that on that one, so we need to stay on one. And I feel bad for the economic development director because he was in the middle of a presentation and he hasn't finished it from what I understand. So No, so see, he should finish this, and we're bouncing back and forth.
It's just, I mean, this is a free-flowing work study session. so
I
it
understand,
can't-
but you've got somebody in the middle of a presentation, so.
I understand.
Can we
We're trying to figure out how we're gonna move forward. So, the balanced budget, is everybody okay if we move forward looking at the balanced budget?
I'm fine.
Okay, and then we can go back to the economic development.
May I just provide some clarity?
Yes.
Just for the purposes of the additional sheets that were in the slide packet, they were just for additional information in case there were questions asked. It really wasn't anything to present. So then my slide did conclude at the number sheet there. Okay, thank you.
And Lori, your recommendation would be then, based on the balanced budget, to raise the police to the enhanced.
Actually, it was just to start a conversation. Nobody was starting a conversation, so it was just to prompt a conversation to get going on one of these in one direction.
Okay.
And if we want to stay on the on the balance, I keep saying baseline, I don't have a problem with working off of that one.
Okay. Other questions before Kwame leaves? Any other questions of Kwame? Okay. Other questions or comments? We've had a recommendation from the police. We've had a recommendation from economic development. Any recommendations on the community development? Changes to the balanced budget approach for the community development?
I would agree with Councilmember Wilson that initially we were at 775 and we reduced that to the 500,000.
You're talking about economic development?
Yes.
So that would actually be on the balance, that would be increasing it.
Increasing it then.
By
Yeah, from
250.
275 to 500.
Thank you,
recommendation.
correct.
Would you like me to put up the Excel spreadsheet? Okay. So I'm just going to hide these columns for the baseline and enhance, just since we're focusing on, and that way we don't get confused. So what I have is per the reports, the beginning fund balance, the total revenues, expenditures. This will be adjustments, either pluses or minuses. Minuses will be increases in expenditures, anything. And there's the ending fund balance, and these are representing the surplus and deficit as it stands represented in the staff report. So we have the 1920 and then the 2021. So would you like me to add the increased funding for economic development to 500,000 each year to this spreadsheet, just for purposes of this exercise to see what it does?
For purposes of it, yeah. Now that's an increase of actually 250, is that right? Because the balance already has 220.
It has 275, so it makes it up to 225,000. Oh, sorry, I get what you're saying. Yes, sorry. I'll fix that. Hold on a second here. Thank you for correcting that. Okay, so you can see with that action, it takes the surplus to 1.3 million, and it was previously, let me get to the table there. It was 1.569, and then in the 2021, it takes the surplus from 389,475 down to 164,475. I can put what this was, just so we have this. Okay.
The other recommendation that was made was to have the police department increase to the enhanced, which would be an increase of 817 in year one and a increase of 1.148 million in year two.
Well, part of it is, so just on the enhanced, just so you know, the where it says the 110 sworn, the 1.91 million, since that would need to be backed out of that figure because that's already built into the baseline, so it's in these numbers that are in here for purposes of the chart. Just so you know, we put it on there so you would know the cost of adding the funding for the 6 full-time officers, so.
I'm just looking at the general fund police budget version, and if you look at the balanced version of for 1920 of basically an increase over fiscal year 1819 of 6094. If you look at the enhanced 1920 and you do the math of 6911 minus the 6094, it creates an increase, and that's where I got the increase of 817. Doing the same thing with the enhanced of fiscal year 2021 compared to the balanced of fiscal year 2021, it's an increase of basically 1.148 million. We're good. Yeah, that's what I'm going. Yeah.
I've got something messed up in my formula here. Let me see. 0.5%.
Don, the question I have on that is when you look at your chart on page 20, which shows the general fund police budget version comparisons, I'm just looking at literally the enhanced fiscal year 1920 increase over fiscal year 1819, comparing it to the balanced fiscal year 1920, and it shows roughly an $817,000 difference. So how are you getting to the $1.6 million difference?
That's why I'm trying to check my, well, so the balanced only has, like I stated, so it's the one, so if you look on page 13, it's 1.5 million, but I back out the 1,091,000 from that figure because the 6 additional officers are already in the baseline number. So the 538 is the additional to get to the 12 officers plus the other positions, plus they had other equipment and stuff like that. So that's where the 538 comes from in the balanced. So then to add all the other positions in 1920, you also have to add the CSOs. So actually, let me try it this way so that it doesn't get confused. Let me try it this way.
Just looking at these two numbers. Right?
I know I need to make this negative, so hold on here. 49,503.
While she works on that, Councilmember Ogorchak, did you have comments?
Well, I mean, I do, and I have questions to see where we're at and what this does to the budget as soon as she gets there.
That's close.
If it's going where I think it's going to go, I'm going to call the police chief up.
apologize for my delay in this, sorry.
I appreciate what you're doing. I couldn't do it.
Trying to make sure I'm accurate here, so. We still get to the 115. So, there we go, and then I have to add the part-time help.
Is it $1,000,007?
savings.
Is it right? Over? Is it this one?
Should be 1.148 million over.
Damn.
It's just the change from the enhanced to the balanced.
Okay. I believe it's, so what I did is I added everything that was on the enhanced schedule on 5 that was not on 13, plus added the additional cost for one more records technician and then 2 more animal care attendants, and then offset that with another part-time help.
Councilmember Ogorchuk?
So, thank you, Don. It's okay if you keep working. It's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And I would really like to give the police department everything that you've asked for. And I know there's a reason probably why you asked for those things, correct?
Yes, I was very intentional in the positions that I asked for.
Okay, so is there a compromise in your ask? Can
Sure.
we compromise?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to go down to, I'm going to leave the crime analysis and the DVM. I know we need desperately, and there is a savings in that one. Animal care attendant in the balanced budget, it's 1, 2. Would that work for you?
I would prefer 3, but I'll take 2.
Okay, thank you. And there is savings in that one. Records technician, I believe you had 3 and 1 is on the balance, correct?
No, I asked for 2, and I would like both of those.
Okay. Is it possible if we give you 1 this year and then 1 in 2021?
Well, is it possible is up to you guys.
Well, I know, but is
I
it-
will tell you, and I'll just give you some food for thought when it comes to our records technicians.
Okay.
So we currently have 1 supervisor and 5 records technicians, which is the same level of staffing that we had back when we had 80 police officers. So we've added virtually 30 police officers, but we haven't added any additional record staff to handle the influx of subpoenas, warrants, police reports, citations, all the processing that goes with that. There's timeliness issues relating to the job that they do. Cases have to be filed with the district attorney's office if they're in custodies. Citations have to be submitted to the court so that people have an opportunity to go to court. Subpoenas have to be served in time so officers can go to court. And there's a lot of things that our records staff do not have the ability to do right now. Things are being delayed. Restraining orders have to be entered into the system, and all these things are being delayed because we don't have adequate staff. And again, adding to the fact that we've added almost 30 police officers during that time. And just to bring you back a little bit, we used to have 1 supervisor and 9,
And what are total number right now?
and we're at 1 and 5.
Does that include police reports? On the records technician, do they do the police, I mean, not the accident reports, I'm sorry, traffic accidents?
Yeah, so they're responsible for approving all those. They have to verify all the data. They have to approve it. Accident reports mostly are available online. They are the ones responsible for taking that information and actually putting it into the server so that it could be available online for people. All of the administrative functions that go along with whether it's restraining orders or emergency protective orders, police reports, citations, vehicle theft, you know, if things need to be entered into the system, stolen vehicles, stored vehicles, stolen firearms, restraining orders, all that they do all of that, and it's extremely important that we get additional staffing so that we can maintain the timeliness of the work that we do.
Now. 2. I'm going to put 2 in there. And then the other compromise, I'm asking if we could do the 100 up to 112 this cycle, and then add the other 3 in next 2021.
Yes, and I had a conversation with the city manager and felt that that was okay.
Okay, that's my recommendation.
What about CSOs?
Oh, poop, I forgot that one. It's written right there. 4 CSOs.
So the CSOs, as I believe I've talked to most of the council about this, I recognize that that was one position in which, depending upon the availability of funding, we could look at different tiered levels. And so that's why I had initially provided during the staff report, in which I gave these requests, 2, 4, or 6 were my asks, and it really just depended upon how much money we had to fund those positions. So with 2, as the mayor mentioned, I would put those people in the jail so that it would enable police officers, after they make an arrest, to get back out onto the street in our city in a more timely manner.
Well, I apologize. The reason I was asking for 4 is when I learned that 8 to 10 calls per shift the CSOs can handle. So it's taking a lot of those calls off the police department, allowing them to do their job. So therefore, if we're asking you to do 112 this year and then put off 3 more to the following year, I did have 4 CSOs on here. So is that a good compromise?
Yes.
Okay, that's my recommendation. Recommendation, thank you.
Can you say one more time what the ones?
Well, I apologize. 4 CSOs, the crime analyst, the DVM, 2 animal care attendants, 2 records technicians. We did the 110 already, up to 112 sworn this year, and then 2021 up to 115.
And I just want to make sure that you're also aware that from the enhanced version of that, that also removes an office assistant from the animal shelter.
And Chief, can you talk a little bit about what that job is?
Sure. The office assistant is someone who greets people at the front counter, answers phone calls, helps with processing of licenses. If you've ever been to our shelter, you know we have a high volume of people who come into the shelter. They're the people who initially greet you when you come in. Currently we have 1. And then if that person is on vacation or sick or otherwise occupied handling 1 transaction, and we have a line of people who still need to be served, then ACAs and ACOs end up coming in and filling that role, which is why I had asked for an additional office assistant so that we can keep the ACAs and the ACOs doing the jobs that they're supposed to be doing.
I wouldn't have a problem adding that on there because I've been in there and there is a long line. And then sometimes they go in the back. So
what's the cost of that? The one, do we have that figure?
$37,909.
I'm sorry?
$37,909.
That's for half a year.
I was going to the second one. Sorry, I'm not fast enough. $83,688.
Thank you. To see how these numbers look.
So based on 1 more animal control attendant, 4 CSOs, 1 more records tech, and 1 office assistant, you can see comparing the surplus deficit to what it was. The surplus was 1.5. It goes to just over $1 million in 1920, but then we go into deficit spending in 2021 of $580,000 with those requests.
You know, I have a question. Somebody had brought it up earlier in their questions. There's other businesses that are coming into town that we haven't looked at, such as cannabis. I know there's 2 major cannabis people that are looking to come into town, and that's not been considered at all as far as possible revenue. And I know we've included other revenue sources that haven't filed, so that's another thought.
I'd actually like to hear from Forrest and kind of give us a timeline of what cannabis is looking like in our first, the potential. We can't assume that one's going to be approved, but one is coming up for discussion.
You have an application scheduled for April 23rd for the first cannabis dispensary. Assuming they're approved and they proceed diligently, it's reasonable to think they'd be open by the end of the fiscal year, so July 1. And in terms of what that will result in, we still have to discuss development agreements, which we'll get to later tonight.
Right.
And specifically a development agreement for their project, and it's a little early to guess. They'll be trickling in after that. We have a couple of others lined up, and we've gotten past that big surge now, and I think we're probably going to be looking at one every 2 months or so for the next year.
Well, without getting, I guess, too much in what we're going to talk about later, can you talk about some of the elements that could exist in what we'll be taxing effectively?
Yeah, so be clear, we do not have an adopted tax, but development agreements in other cities typically have a gross receipt payment required. It ranges anywhere from 4% to 10%. Oakland recently lowered theirs is an official tax, so it's not negotiated individually, from 10% down to 5%. The market seems to hover between 4 and 6% of gross receipts. I don't know what gross receipts are for an operation like that, but we'll find out.
And so I think many of us have visited Rio Vista Farms, a small mom and pop shop type operation, and their estimates are at like 1.2 million in revenue that they're bringing into the city of Rio Vista. And our facilities will be much larger than what's happening there. So while we can't guesstimate in terms right now, we know what's coming with these cannabis firms.
It's not nothing.
Right.
Mayor Pro Tem Motz.
Forrest, do we have, when do you anticipate the manufacturing, when is that, do you think that's going to be coming in and being?
We don't have any applications for manufacturing except for one large one.
That's the one I'm speaking of.
Yeah. They have a lot ahead of them before they get to that stage, simply because the site's undeveloped. So I wouldn't expect to have active manufacturing for a year or two. Just simply what it's going to take to get the site built. Even when they get past us, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe sooner, though.
Other questions, comments?
Are we going to, can we continue down through
Other
some of the
areas, yes.
Under the city manager, we've had discussions throughout about a public information officer. I think we should probably maybe look at doing that contractually with somebody. Maybe putting a maximum dollar figure on that of, say, $100,000. 50, 19, 20. I'm just estimating. And it's also very clear, as we discussed in our previous work studies, that the city manager is trying to run a city of 115,000 all by himself, manage all the employees, and do the wonderful things that he's doing when it comes to advocating for additional monies and grants and everything else. So I just think it's critical that we add somebody to his staff to support him. So either an assistant or a deputy city manager. We had talked about an assistant to the city manager, but I think that's more of a clerical position. I'm thinking of somebody that would actually be able to step in in his place in his absence. So an assistant of some kind.
It is 6:30. We are going to go ahead and take a break. City Council starts at 7 o'clock. We will resume this study session after City Council meeting. So when City Council ends, we will then resume the budget study session. Not all